Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Caregiver Coffee Shop podcast. I am so excited, guys, to have my special guest on the podcast this morning with me. Her name is Megan Ehrlich, and Megan and I have a unique connection as we met through the same business coach. We have the same business coach. Shout out to Faith Mariah. And she is amazing. She is a physical therapist, and she's also a pain relief coach. And because I am passionate about helping you guys as caregivers just take care of yourselves, having Megan come on just made total sense because she can help us with understanding how to find that healthy balance between getting it all done without doing too much, and especially from the physical standpoint, right, of using good body mechanics and just paying attention to when our body might be saying, hello, you need to slow down, you're doing too much, or there's a problem. Just if you're not a if you're not in the healthcare industry like what Megan and I have been in, sometimes I know it can be a little frustrating and just not as easy to kind of pay attention and catch those things. So, and that's why I'm so excited, excuse me, about Megan coming on and sharing her heart and her story and her tips and her expertise to help you in your caregiving journey. So, Megan, thank you for being on the podcast today.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here and have this conversation with you. All of this is so important, and I don't think caregivers get enough support and really enough help and recognition for all of the hard work that they do, especially if you're a caregiver for someone in your own home.
Right, right. And I know, speaking from experience, I unfortunately did get a back injury. It's chronic. It's a permanent back injury from when I practiced as a CNA in healthcare. And it's never going to go away. And I certainly want my family caregivers, my spousal caregivers out there to be aware of what they can do to take care of their bodies, because they only have one back, one pair of knees, one pair of arms, one pair of elbows, one pair of shoulders. It's very important that you guys do pay attention to how you're taking care of your body, and even just subtly throughout the day, how you're moving your body, because we don't really think about that. We can get so tunnel visioned in just trying to go throughout our day. But if we're not paying attention to how we're moving our bodies, that's when we can have injuries, and that can really impact how we do care, like you said, as caregivers. But before we dive all into that, let's hear a little bit about you. I want you to share with our listeners about your story and with your business and how that ties into what segued into you creating an online business, besides obviously being a formal physical therapist.
Yeah, so I am a practicing licensed physical therapist. I have been for about 5 years. And I actually started as a caregiver myself. I was an in-home caregiver through undergrad, needed something to do. I knew that it would give me good experience with patient care and just really understanding the needs of my patients and helping and applying what I was learning in school. And that was a really, really helpful experience. Of course, I had some training as a caregiver, but it was just a really rewarding experience for me, and it did help a lot going into PT school. And in PT school and in my career as a physical therapist, I started to learn that there was just a lot of things that people were not being taught. And like, if you don't go to school to learn body mechanics and to learn some of this stuff, learn all these pain relief things, you don't really know what to do. And I was running into that a lot with my patients, where they would literally tell me, like, why didn't anybody tell me this sooner? Like, well, that's a good question. Like, when would people be able to tell you this? Like, how would people ever know to provide this kind of information on like things for pain relief, little tips for injury prevention? Like, how would anybody know to provide that kind of information to you? I just realized there wasn't a good platform and a good way for people to receive this information. So that's really what transformed my business into also offering online stuff, because I just realized that no one knew where to even ask some of these questions. So you're just Googling, hoping you're finding the right information. But with my skill set, with my knowledge, I can provide more curated information and actually just answer questions specific to someone's situation. And that's why I really like what I'm doing online, because it's just quick, it's fast. You don't have to come see me. So I really like that.
I love that. And I love how you touched about even just the whole rabbit hole of Google. I mean, not to say that there's not good information on Google, because I mean, I'm an entrepreneur too, as well. And we are trying to make on Google and share our story and get our stuff out there on the internet to make it accessible to the average person. But again, it can be a rabbit hole. Like, if you don't really understand if you don't really understand the underlying um, education basis, a reason why you have all these things happening to you, or what to do if these things happen to you, without seeing an actual professional who themselves may not be telling you, like you said, sharing this information that is so important to know. I just love that. I love that you're just really taking a step to like, let's make it available to everybody. And I love how you said curtailed to a person's individual situation, because everyone's different. They have a different situation, a different body, a different type of uh reaction to how they get pain relief, because not everything will work for the same person. And with the healthcare system, unfortunately, a lot of people just think like, oh, if I just take some pain relief medicine or go that route, that will be the answer to their problem. But then you're just putting more chemical in, and you're not addressing the underlying root cause of pain, or maybe an underlying injury, or even just educating themselves further about how they can prevent and know how, like you said, like the root cause body mechanics. That's a huge one.
Yeah.
Of how they can even just address moving their body in a different way so they don't end up with that type of problem. So so obviously I know with us as entrepreneurs, we have the problem of sitting too much, and
Yeah.
then we don't move, and then we have problems with that. But what are some other good body mechanics for the caregiver who maybe does move a lot? I have a higher functioning spouse that is only in critical need of my assistance when he has an episode, when he has a seizure. But I'm also thinking about caregivers who are doing at home what I did as a CNA, where they're maneuvering a bedridden loved one, or having to transfer a loved one a lot from, say, their bed to their wheelchair, to the toilet, to the tub. There's just so many opportunities as a caregiver every day when you're just going about daily life to injure yourself. So, what would be some tips that you would suggest for just how to just pay attention, and how to maybe just move their body, but make sure they're moving their bodies in a healthier way to avoid injuries? Because that's the last thing you need as a caregiver, is you yourself dealing with added pain, an injury, extra medical appointments, extra cost if you're on a fixed income like we are. How can we help our caregivers just avoid these kind of problems to begin with, Megan?
Yeah. So one of the main things that I see with transfers and lifting and things like that is people tend to hold their breath when they know they're going to do something that requires a lot of effort. And with holding your breath, people do like they brace themselves like they're going to do something heavy. But holding your breath is actually not a very good thing. It doesn't let you engage your diaphragm. It alters your intra-abdominal pressure. And some people actually develop hernias from doing this. So just making sure that you're not holding your breath, that you're exhaling as you're doing that thing that requires the most effort, like the actual like lifting and transfer part, that can be really helpful. I would say that comes when people are concentrating really hard, when people are anticipating something's going to be heavy, if something's like a tense, stressful situation. That's very common, but really just taking some deep breaths and focusing on actually breathing is probably one of the things I have to coach people on the most, because you just don't even realize that you're doing it. So that would
I,
be the first thing.
I love that. And I was just even thinking about that too. Like, how many times did I transfer a patient as a CNA? And I'm thinking about back to that. It's been a while since I transferred someone with a gait belt. It's been like 3 years since I've done that. But still, it's making me think like, was I doing that? Did I remember to breathe? I don't think in my training I even thought about that either. When I was being trained, I was taught how to use, like, where to position my body,
Mhm.
and like where to place the gait belt device, which is a belt, guys. It goes around. So I'm holding on to that versus under their arms or extremities, which again could cause more injury to either myself as the caregiver or the person I'm caring for, just for a little headspace there. But still, I don't think anyone was really ever coached me on that aspect of don't hold your breath, or even pay attention to how you're breathing and engaging your diaphragm when you're doing that. So I love that. So I just learned something new. Hello. What would be
Yeah.
another tip that you would have?
Another tip, and this goes for pretty much anything, is get a step closer to whatever it is you're working with. If you are transferring someone, if you are bathing someone, if you are reaching for any reason, so often we just, we kind of reach. We're like, our arms can do it. Like we can reach, or like I can bend my back more, but I cannot tell you how many times I've seen someone just need to take like a step or even a half step closer and be in more of like a staggered stance with 1 foot forward, 1 foot back if you can't get like right up there. But if you're standing too far away, that's going to inherently put more stress on your back, on your shoulders, on everything. So if there's ever an opportunity and you feel like you're reaching or something's feeling uncomfortable, just ask yourself, like, can I get just one step closer, and physically move your body that little bit, and it will help so much. Seriously, it comes up so often. And then I tell people and they're like, oh, this feels a lot better. But all we did was just have them do the same mechanics one step closer.
Oh, I love that. And as an aide, that was something huge I had to do all the time. If I had to lower a patient to the floor, if I had to transfer someone, I wanted them close to my body. I had them like close to my body. I did not like holding them out here, even just like a foot away from me, because it was too much, because I would feel it instantly in my shoulders. It's like I have to have them close to me with that gait belt. So that is very important. And as a caregiver, it's not just, think about this too, guys, anything like Megan said, anything that you're lifting or maneuvering, medical supplies, boxes, those of you who maybe are caring for someone with dialysis. My mom used to do dialysis, and I can attest those boxes are heavy. One box of dialysate is huge, is heavy. And if you're holding it out farther, it's going to put stress on your upper back, your shoulders, and then you're going to end up with like tendonitis, problems with your shoulders, rotator cuff problems. The possibilities of something really lifelong and permanent are there. So yes, keep things close to your body is a big one. I would also say too, Megan, what about if you are sitting a lot? Uh, what can people do to avoid that? Even if they're not an entrepreneur, but they're sitting a lot or they've been sitting a lot, what's something that they could do to just get up and move, or even just to alleviate that stress that you have when you've been sitting and you're hunched over and then you go to stretch? And sometimes I know personally for me, if I've been sitting too long, and even though I stretch, it doesn't feel like I'm getting enough relief. You know what I mean? So what are some tips for that?
Yeah. So if you're in a position where you have to sit for a long period of time, one of the main things that I notice with that is that sometimes it's the position of your chair itself. Really, when you're sitting down, you want your back to be supported and you want your feet to be flat on the floor, and you want your hip to be bent at 90 degrees and your knee to be bent at 90 degrees. So a lot of times people will look and they think that they're in a good position, but maybe they're sitting in a way that their hips are up higher. So their knees may be bent at 90 degrees, but maybe their hips are either like up higher, like they're kind of up past their hips, or they're down too low. And so what that does is it changes the tension in some of your muscles. So sometimes, even if you're sitting in a chair and your feet can reach the floor, sometimes you still need to put something under your feet to help with that 90-degree positioning. And just a couple of inches of adjustment can make a huge, huge difference with that. If you feel like your back can't reach the back of your chair and it needs to be more supported, one thing I use is I take just a bath towel and I just roll it up like a cylinder. I used to have one like with me here, but I don't think I do right now. But just roll it up and put rubber bands on either end, or use masking tape and tape it, and just put it in the small of your back so it provides more support and you can reach the chair. They sell things for that, but honestly, I recommend the bath towel method first, because you want to make sure it's actually fit right to you. But that just provides a little bit more support for the actual sitting part, because sometimes sitting's inevitable. I mean, we have to do it, but that helps me a ton. I use that in my own office all the time.
Nice. Well, and I was just thinking too, like you said, you gave the tip about using something to move to put under your feet to help you with that alignment for your hips, and then the towel method. But is there a specific type of chair too that could be beneficial that you maybe want to avoid, that can kind of tempt you? Like my chair, for example, it can lean back, it can move, and so it can be tempting to lean back instead of like keep yourself at an upright position. So are there types of chairs that you recommend maybe ditching, or just invest
Um,
in?
Not necessarily, because I'm not a person who believes like anything is like good or bad in terms of bodies or positioning, because sometimes like you're in a situation where like, this is the chair I have. So sometimes if a chair is like really hard or really rigid, that can just put more pressure on certain areas of your body, like maybe it's putting a lot of pressure through your glutes and it's really uncomfortable. So maybe you need a cushion for that. But keep in mind, if you put a cushion or something on the chair, that may mess up that angle a little bit. So if you add a cushion, you may have to add something under your feet. And it just comes down to kind of playing around with some of those angles. I go into all of this a lot more. I do have a program where I talk about this a lot, but just some things to look at is if you're in a position where like that is the chair that you have, it just how can you kind of build it up with things that you have around the house? Like maybe you're using a towel roll, maybe you're sitting on a cushion or a pillow to make it work. But like I don't recommend any one particular chair because our body types are all so different. And it really comes down to how long is your leg? Because, like you may sit in a chair that's too shallow for me, but it may be perfect for you. You may need some of this extra support in your back and I may not. So like, I don't recommend like any one set thing. I recommend finding a chair that helps you be in these positions and just modifying it kind of as you go.
Right. So basically just still taking the chair, whatever it is, and then just tweaking it with tools and pieces of equipment that around your home, to save the expense too, that work
Yeah.
for you and work for you, and your specific needs. I love that. And what types, so, I'm when I'm thinking about body mechanics, besides paying attention to, we've addressed like how you sit, tools to help you sit better with better posture, and just things to pay attention to so if you need to add a piece of equipment or a tool to help you with that. But I'm also thinking too with body mechanics and just movement, exercise is a big thing too. Obviously I know you're not an expert, or excuse me, an exercise person, but still I'm sure there's things like in terms of physical therapy from that standpoint that you can do to kind of help keep yourself flexible, stretched, and not, because another thing, besides, injuries, the other problem is sorry, my brain's getting ahead of my mouth here. Is just like muscle strain, like maybe tight muscles and things like that. So obviously, like we've talked about, positioning does help. But are there exercises or tips like that you would recommend for helping caregivers just be a little more flexible, not be so tense? Because obviously I know movement is not just important in terms of preventing energy. Proper movement is not just important for preventing injury, but also just movement helps your mind too. It helps relieve stress. It helps you stay more calm. It gives you a break. So do you have any tips or ideas for helping our listeners with that?
Yes. And actually, I am an exercise person. I do go a ton into exercise. So definitely do have a lot of tips for this. And the main thing I see is people will feel tense and tight, and they're typically trying to stretch tight muscles when oftentimes it's strengthening that needs to happen because other muscles are trying to take over for weak muscles and it's causing them to respond by feeling tense or tight. So a lot of things like when it comes to like transferring and things like caregivers do, or even for sitting, like it's a lot of things with postural muscles. So some very simple things that I recommend is we talked about already, like using your diaphragm and doing diaphragmatic breathing. So actually intentionally breathing through the diaphragm, expanding through the diaphragm. That is a big one. Another thing I recommend is, and these are just simple things that I like to do habit stacking for stuff like this, for things you do all the time. Like what are just some simple things to add into your day to make things easier? And when I say like the habit stacking, it's because a lot of times, like when people are busy, like when you're caregivers and you're doing this stuff all the time, a lot of times people are not keen to say like, let's also go work out, when essentially you've been doing that all day because you've been transferring people and lifting people and maneuvering
Absolutely.
people. Like it is
Yes.
a workout. And like people don't think about that enough. Like you are working out, you are exercising, you are physically moving a body that weighs something. Like you are working. But it's just like the habit stacking is like, what can you do to make this a little bit easier? And so the diaphragmatic breathing, that's one of them. Intentionally engaging your diaphragm, chin tucks, and that's basically getting yourself out of a forward head posture where you're kind of slouched and your neck is forward. Just doing a little chin tuck to work the muscles in the front of your neck. Because if you're lifting and you're bending and your head is out forward, that is actually going to increase some of the tension in your low back, and it can increase kind of the compensation through your shoulders as well. So it doesn't seem like it, but just by doing a little chin tuck, that can be helpful. Then what I do is I tell people to focus on these mechanics with like everything that you're doing. If you're reaching overhead, like your neck should not be coming up and looking up at the sky. Of course, you can look up at what you're doing. You can do that. But it's a difference between I'm looking up versus like I'm leaning my neck forward to make up for the fact that my shoulder's stiff. There's a difference. It's not like you have to look straight ahead the whole time. It's like, are you doing that because your shoulder can't make it and you're using your neck and your back to get that extra movement? So I see that a ton.
I
And
agree with that. I was just thinking about that yesterday. I was like straining to reach something off the shelf, and I'm only 5 foot tall. So maybe even taking that a step further and to avoid the straining, maybe just taking that extra second
yeah,
and getting a step stool so you aren't intentionally stressing the muscles the wrong way by putting yourself in a position where you're moving your body in a not so good way. So
yeah.
I will never think about getting things off the shelf that I can't reach again the same.
Yeah,
And
and it's
being my
not
step
like
stool.
you can't do those things. I mean,
Yeah.
our bodies are pretty resilient. Like our bodies are meant to do all kinds of different things. But if you're doing it over and over and over, and like you notice, like, oh wow, I'm reaching a lot, I'm getting on a step stool a lot. Like, like just what can you do to just make it just a little bit easier? But in
Hmm.
terms of exercises like you asked about, diaphragmatic breathing and actually using the diaphragm, doing chin tucks to encourage that neutral spine, abdominal bracing, and just learning how to actively engage your core, because your core is an anticipatory muscle, meaning it should be kind of kicking on when you're doing things like lifting and reaching and stuff like that. Your abdominal muscles do kind of kick on and activate. And so we don't always have to think about that. Like sometimes they just do that, but they could use a little help in strengthening and like working under these different conditions. So that's something I cover. I have a lot of this kind of stuff like in my membership. Every week I share new exercises and stuff. So I've been doing this for a while. So there's a very big database. But really, it's if you're noticing you're feeling weak when you're doing something or you're feeling pain when you're doing something, that probably means that your body's either doing too much of something. So you just kind of pushed it to that limit and it's your body's just asking for a little bit of break or modification. If you're noticing that it's a pain, then is it compensating for something else? Is it something that you're getting really tired when you're doing it, your body needs a break? Well, then how can you strengthen other muscles or how can you modify what you're doing or simply give yourself a little bit of rest to let those muscles recover before you do the next thing? So it's the
Right.
awareness that I think is a really big part of it.
Right. That just stopping and pausing and paying attention to what your body's trying to tell you. Excuse me. Like you're saying, like, is it pain? Is it just stress? Is it just because you're just needing a break and need to have that stop pause moment? I love that. I love that. So you've mentioned your program a little bit. So I want to hear a little bit about that. So where can we learn more about your program and what does it all cover?
Yeah. So my Conquer Your Pain Pro membership, that is my baby. It's my pet project. I love it. But with that, the whole reason that it came about is like I was saying, a lot of people were talking to me about like, well, why didn't anybody teach me this sooner? Or like, I wish I could have just asked you this question. Like, just getting your feedback on this has helped so much. So I turned that into a membership. And so in my membership, what I do is every month I do a training based on questions that I'm getting over and over from members. If there's something where I'm like, wow, we really need to like go into this a little bit deeper, I'll do a workshop or training on that specific thing. Like this month, or I guess for next month, my members have requested to talk about compensations, like when like they actually use the word compensation. Like, how do I know like when my body is doing something and it's compensating for something else? Like, what are some signs of that? So that's going to be the training for that. But basically what I do is I do the training. Every week I share a new exercise that's related to the training. And it's not just exercise for the sake of exercise. It's always an exercise that ties into something. So I don't just say like, we're doing chin tucks just to do chin tucks. I'm saying if you're noticing neck pain when you're reaching or when you're lifting, then here's how we do a chin tuck. And this is how it's going to help you. So it's always related to a specific thing. So every single week I do those and then it gets saved to a database and it's in the membership. So members can always go back to it. But then I also do weekly Facebook live calls where you can submit a form, tell me specifically what's going on. Like, I get pain when I'm reaching overhead. What can I do to help with that? You can get as specific or as general as you want. And then I go on live and I actually walk through that process and what to do. And then I do ask me anything calls where people can ask me about anything. Like, I'm going to the doctor. What kinds of things should I be asking them? Or anything that comes up. I mean, it's an open book. If I don't have the answer or it's out of my scope, I will say that, and I will just help kind of direct my members to different resources, because I don't know it all. I don't pretend to. Some things, it's truly not my place to be providing support on that topic, but I can definitely help find additional resources, which I think is also incredibly beneficial.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I love that. So, how can people apply? Do you have a website, or do they need to send you an email, or what's the best way for them, for people who are interested, who are listening, to get information about your program?
The membership is always open. And right now I do have a 7-day trial that's running for free. So on my website, diligencept.com/CYP-trial. And I can send you the link to that. But on my website, you'll have my website link, just diligencept.com/everything. You'll see all of the different programs that I have. And with that, most of them are actually included in the membership, but I know some people, they don't want to do a membership model. So there are different ways to work with me. If you just have a question, you just want to book a one-on-one call with me, there are ways to do that. But the free trial and the membership itself are definitely a good way to reach out to me and to get that kind of feedback. And if you're not sure if the membership is for you, you can always just message me on Instagram. We can chat about if it's actually a good fit for you, because ultimately the goal is to give people the resources that they feel like they need and to help support them. It's not to make them feel like this is the only way or this is the only answer. It's just another way to get some support.
Right, absolutely. And what is your handle on Instagram so people can follow you?
Diligence PTAZ.
Nice. All right. Well, all that information, her website link, her email, her Instagram, I'll include those in the show notes below, whether you're watching this on the website, YouTube, or Spotify, wherever you're watching. It'll be included in the description box below. So be sure to follow and like and follow Megan's work, because it's amazing. I love the information she's giving on body mechanics and just how we can safely move our bodies and prevent injury and just be healthier and being pain-free overall, because the last thing we really want to be doing and dealing with again as caregivers is extra injuries, extra pain, and even just going about dealing with pain in the wrong way of just putting a band-aid approach over it versus actually addressing the underlying causes of the pain and the discomfort, and just putting a band-aid approach, like I said, of say just medication, when actually it could be permanently fixed by just changing the way we move our bodies. So Megan, I really appreciate you taking the time to come onto the Caregiver Coffee Chat podcast today, because this information I think is going to be a game changer for a lot of amazing caregivers out there who are struggling. And I'm just so excited for you and everything that you're doing with the membership. And I cannot wait to hear about how things go for April for you with your workshop.
Yeah,
It sounds going to be
you.
amazing. That workshop sounds really interesting. Amazing. So anyway, guys, thank you for tuning in for this episode of the Caregiver Coffee Chat podcast. Be sure to like, follow, subscribe, so you'll be able to be notified when the next episode is on. And be sure to tune in on Monday, because I will be having my next special guest, Carrie Evelyn. She is a mompreneur, a Christian, and also a budding fiction author. And she's going to be talking about her journey of balancing motherhood and caregiving and chronic illness, while through the lens of being an ambitious Christian mom and dealing with the reality of expectations versus reality of life as a busy Christian mom. So thank you for tuning in, and I will see you on the next episode of the Caregiver Coffee Chat podcast. Take care, guys.